So I'm a massive fan of the original run of Dexter, and like most people was let down by both the original ending of the series and the ending to Dexter New Blood. When I heard that Showtime was developing a Harrison spinoff, I could not have cared less because New Blood did not do anything to make me care about the character of Harrison. When I heard that the Harrison spinoff had kind of morphed into a third attempt to close out Dexter's story properly, I was pretty skeptical. However, I went into it with cautious optimism. Do I want to see a proper, satisfying conclusion to Dexter Morgan's story? Yes. However, am I tired of being let down? Also yes. Full warning, this review will contain full spoilers for the entire first season of Dexter Resurrection, as well as the original Dexter series and Dexter New Blood. Without further ado, let's get into the plot of Dexter Resurrection. The best thing about this season's plot is how it kind of manages to reset the status quo for this new series. It gets rid of the ending of New Blood and kind of introduces the new setting, the new plot threads, and the new ensemble of characters. I actually really like the setting of New York City because it feels different enough from Miami to give this series its own vibe, but at the same time definitely has its own distinct energy. And something that this season as a whole does very, very well is setup and payoff. There are seemingly small, meaningless conversations in one episode that one or two episodes later will have big payoff. Something that I'm surprised by is just how aesthetically similar this series is to Dexter New Blood. It has a very similar color palette, aspect ratio, and title sequence. There's also some stylistic choices that carry over from New Blood to this show, such as having the title of the episode be integrated into the episode itself, and having the episode begin with little flashes that reveal stuff that's going to happen later in the episode. Let's start by talking about episode 1. The way in which this series retcons New Blood's ending is fine. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a little bit contrived, but it almost feels necessary. I can somewhat believe that Angela would save Dexter as a way of repaying him for avenging Iris and taking out Kurt Caldwell, but I wish we got at least one scene between Angela and Dexter, and I don't buy at all that Dexter's killing of Logan could be ruled self-defense. Dexter killed Logan by snapping his neck, meaning that he was standing right next to Logan. If Logan wanted to kill Dexter by shooting him, why would he stand close enough that Dexter could snap his neck? That being said, all of that feels very much like a necessary speed bump to get this series where it needs to be. I wish that they didn't have to sloppily retcon the ending of New Blood, but they really did. There are a lot of things to like in this premiere episode. I really like the contrast between Dexter and Harrison's morning routine. It does a good job showing just how similar but how different they are. And I really like the scenes of Dexter's hallucinations. They're not just fan service, they play a thematic role in the story. They each represent kind of a part of who Dexter is. And I also really like the way that this episode incorporated Batista. It was one of the very many plot threads that was set up in New Blood but never really went anywhere. And I really like the scenes where Dexter interacts with Batista. I love how you can tell that they're happy to see each other, but they're also very unsure of each other. Let's move on to episode 2. I think that Dexter's friendship with Blessing is really rushed. They go from complete strangers to basically living with each other in, a few days? That being said, I do really like kind of the logical progression of this episode. Dexter manages to track down Harrison based on just simply reading the news reports about the hotel where the murder took place, and he's able to track down Ronald Schmidt due to the clues that he was provided. However, I do find the beat the episode ends on to be a little bit odd. The episode implies that it's odd for Dexter to care about innocent people, but he always has? Moving on to episode 3, I really liked how the detective characters were able to put together that Harrison was involved in the murder. It feels logical and natural. This episode is where I really started to like Harrison's relationship with Elsa. The actors have good chemistry and their dynamic feels natural. That being said, I don't really know if the plot beat where Blessing teaches Dexter how to be a better rideshare driver really needed to be there. Also, Masuka and Quinn's appearances felt a little bit contrived, they were just kind of fan service. And I found the Dark Passenger's motivation to be a little bit weak. Episode 4 is where the series really started to get interesting. What's most impressive about this episode is how it manages to make you buy into the idea of a dinner for serial killers. On paper, that sounds really corny, but this episode does it in a way that makes it believable. I really like the way that the series introduces the ensemble of killers also. They're each given their own distinct personality and vibe, and none of them feel like repeats of serial killer characters from earlier in the series. And I do like the bond that Dexter's able to form with Prater and the other killers. He's able to find people that he can, to a certain extent, empathize with, even if he knows he'll have to take them out eventually. I particularly love the moment where Dexter reveals himself as the Bay Harbor Butcher to Lowell. I loved Lowell's reaction.
I'm Dexter Morgan. Who's that? The Bay Harbor Butcher.
Let's move on to episode 5. I really like the scenes where Charley visits her mom in the hospital because it adds a lot of depth to her character. I wish that this series did a little bit more with the potential Dexter-Mia relationship. It sets it up to go somewhere really interesting, but it just kind of ends it kind of quickly. That being said, the way that it wraps up that plot line does make sense. Dexter's able to stop her from killing innocents, but also not draw attention to himself. I think the biggest problem with this episode is that Harrison forgives Dexter for killing Logan way too easily. Killing Logan was a blatant violation of the code, and this series never really addresses how that violation would have affected Dexter and Harrison, as well as their relationship. Moving on to episode 6, I really like the scenes where Prater gets interviewed. It gives a lot of insight into how his mind works and why he is the way he is. I also really liked Blessing's backstory. It gives his character a lot of depth and sets him up as a really good foil to Dexter. They're both haunted by their past actions and are trying to do better. I also really loved the way that Dexter outsmarted Gareth. The whole sequence between Dexter and Gareth in Dexter's apartment was so tension-filled. You get the sense that they're both very intelligent and cunning people, and Dexter only slightly manages to get the upper hand. And I loved the twist that the Gemini killer was twins. It makes so much sense, but I didn't see it coming. Episode 7 is one of the best episodes of Dexter we have gotten in a long time. Under normal circumstances, I would have considered the scene where Dexter kills the second twin to be a little bit contrived. However, the series acknowledges that it's a little bit contrived and uses it as Charley's motivation for starting to investigate Dexter. I also liked the moment where Al shows the video of him killing the jogger because it makes the audience realize just how evil Al is. And I really love the scene where Dexter gave his presentation to Prater and the other killers. It adds a lot of depth to his character and really makes us empathize with him to a certain extent. And the ending conversation between Dexter and Angel was excellent. That is one of the best scenes in any piece of Dexter media ever. Both actors bring their A game, and it perfectly establishes the emotional and thematic stakes, and really made me want to see where the series was going to go next. Episode 8 was the closest thing there was to a filler episode. I'm mixed on Harrison's relationship with Gigi. While the actors have good chemistry, I just find it odd that Harrison would turn his back on Elsa that quickly. I also didn't really care for the beat where Blessing gets mad at Dexter for revealing his backstory to his daughter. Blessing never explicitly stated that his daughter didn't know about his backstory, so there was no reason for Dexter to keep it a secret. There's a brief plot beat in this episode that sets up a character arc for Dexter, but it's never really followed up on. Dexter tries to justify killing Bobby Bacala to Harry, and Harry shuts him down. This sets up the idea of Dexter pushing the boundaries of the code, but it's never really mentioned again in the series. That being said, I really like what this episode does for the Batista character, particularly his dynamic with Wallace and Octiva. When they first meet him, they trust him because he appeals to their desire to solve cases, but by the time of this episode, he's just completely lost his mind and comes off as unhinged and obsessive. Episode 9 was the weakest episode in my opinion. The whole thing just felt clumsy and rushed, and it very much felt like a first draft. There are a few things that I like about it. I really like the conversation between Dexter and Charley, and it makes sense that Dexter would be able to appeal to her. I also really like the scene where Dexter explores Charley's apartment because it adds a lot of depth to Charley's character. However, there were a lot of really odd writing and directing choices made in this episode. For one, Dexter and Harrison talking about being serial killers in broad daylight on a crowded street where anyone can hear them. I get it's New York City and people tend to keep to themselves and mind their own business, but still, they could have at least ducked into an alleyway. I also didn't really care for that kind of weird writing choice where Harrison describes his interaction with Charley over the phone to Dexter. Why not just show Harrison's conversation with Charley as like a regular scene? And I think Dexter's decision to kill Leon Prater was very rushed. Prater is a public figure with a huge security staff that's going to be hosting an event entirely attended by police officers the evening that Dexter plans to kill him. How did Dexter think he was going to pull that off? I also didn't really understand how Dexter was able to figure out Charley's address. How did he manage to figure that out just simply by her hotel reservation? And the entire sequence where Batista died felt like a first draft. It's very rushed, it feels sloppily shot and edited, and the pacing is horrible. I don't necessarily mind the idea for the way that they kill off Batista, but it's just executed so sloppily that I ended up disliking it. Let's move on to episode 10. The season finale was more or less a standard Dexter season finale, and that's kind of both a good thing and a bad thing. Prater is quickly identified as the show's big bad, and Dexter has to make it his mission to take Prater out and escape the penthouse. While there's nothing really overtly wrong with this episode, it definitely plays it a little bit too safe and straightforward. To start, I did really like Brian's appearance because he represents Dexter struggling with his dark side. I also really like the way in which Harrison is able to defeat Prater because it's a really good usage of setup and payoff. And while I know a lot of people didn't, I actually really liked the scene where Wallace danced to the Bee Gees, because it adds depth to her character that she's able to kind of drop her aloof, stern persona and have some fun. There were a few moments in this episode I didn't care for, though. For one, I thought Charley's reaction to realizing Prater is spying on her was really off. Did she really think Prater wasn't keeping tabs on her? Especially when you consider all the sketchy stuff that she's done for him. I also thought that the revelation of the New York Ripper's identity was a little underwhelming. It's just some random guy. Now granted, if season 2 continues to develop that plot line and really focus on the hunt for the New York Ripper, that criticism could become moot. However, as it stands, the revelation that the New York Ripper is just some random dude didn't sit right with me. I also didn't really love Dexter's ending monologue. He explains that while he'll never be normal, his bond with Harrison and Blessing allows him to have a shred of humanity. This is like the 4th or 5th time in the series that Dexter's kind of come to this realization that while he'll never be normal, he does have a degree of compassion for other people. It just feels like a repetitive character arc. Let's move on to the characters. So Michael C. Hall is just as good here as he is in the original series. Even in the bad seasons of the original series, Michael C. Hall always brought his A-game acting-wise. However, I am a little bit conflicted as to what Dexter's arc is supposed to be. The series presents him caring for others as kind of a new thing, but he's always cared for others? This season absolutely redeemed Harrison for me. They managed to add a lot of depth to his character in just a few episodes, and I'm impressed by how this series managed to make me buy into the relationship between Dexter and Harrison. You genuinely believe that they care about each other. I actually like Harrison's chemistry with both of his love interests, and I really love how the show contrasts him and Dexter as characters. However, I do wish he had a bit more of a well-defined character arc. Is his arc supposed to be him forgiving his dad and trying to make amends? Is it supposed to be him struggling with his dark side? Like, I don't really know what it's supposed to be. David Zayas as Angel Batista brings his A-game acting-wise. He is the acting standout of the series for me, and I really hope he gets an Emmy nomination. He perfectly portrays the ex-cop being destroyed by his obsession. While I do think the series makes him a little bit too dumb at times, you can kind of justify it by saying that he's becoming more and more consumed by his desire to catch Dexter. And like I said earlier, I don't really mind the way that Batista dies, I just think it was a bad idea to kill Batista, period. It feels like he should be the one to bring Dexter down. The series feels like it was building to a confrontation between Dexter and Batista, but the last 2 episodes kind of sidestep that. While I like Blessing as a character, his relationship with Dexter feels very rushed. He's way too overly nice, and they bond way too quickly. However, I do like the slow reveal of his backstory because it sets him up as a foil to Dexter. I actually really like the Elsa character and her chemistry with Harrison. However, I don't really think the series knows what it wants to do with her. She's very clearly set up as Harrison's love interest, but then she just kind of disappears about 3/4 of the way through the season. The season also sets up a compelling subplot about her conflict with her landlord, but that subplot's never really given a satisfying resolution. And this may be an unpopular opinion, but I actually really like the way this series develops Charley. She's originally established with like this tough, no-nonsense demeanor, but the series kind of slowly establishes her vulnerable side. I also really love the way the series characterizes Prater. We understand why he's so messed up in the head and why he has this fixation with serial killers. However, I don't really like that by the end of the season he pretty much just devolves into a mustache-twirling villain. I'm a little bit mixed on the detective characters. While I'm a bit tired of the vaguely autistic cop character who's able to notice minuscule details, the series kind of does enough with the Detective Wallace character that I don't really mind it here. And I really like that the series brought back James Remar as Harry. It's nice to kind of have Dexter's conscience be personified again, and it's a great way to communicate Dexter's thoughts to the audience. And I know I said this earlier, but I really like the serial killer characters. They each have their own distinct personality and vibe, and even though they're all played by famous actors, Eric Stonestreet, Kristen Ritter, Neil Patrick Harris, David Desmalchin, it doesn't feel like stunt casting. So, to conclude, for the first 8 episodes of this season, this is the best Dexter since season 4. The acting is great, the characters are layered, and the plot threads are very engaging. However, episode 9 is really sloppy, and episode 10 plays it way too safe. The biggest overall problem with this season is that it spends the first 8 episodes setting up the beginning of the end of Dexter, only for the last 2 episodes to sidestep that for just being a standard season of Dexter. And while I'm still excited for season 2, I do wish this season had handled its conclusion a little bit better. So that's it, that's my thoughts. What were y'all's thoughts on Dexter Resurrection season 1? Are you guys excited for season 2? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to see my ranking of all 8 Dexter seasons, click this video right here. If you want to see more Dexter content, click this playlist right here. I'm going to have an updated ranking of all 11 Dexter seasons coming out sometime in the next month or so. As per usual, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe. Bye.